Good morning, good morning. Welcome to a snowy Seollal. Today's like actually Seollal, right? I think. Is that right? I don't know. I'm not Korean or any kind of Asian. But yeah, happy Seollal. Or what is it? Say 행복 많이 받으세요. Happy New Year. Receive a lot of happiness in this new year. So welcome to day 3 of our boot camp. 24 hours remain. So today is infrastructure day. It's the fun stuff where if you're not careful, you're going to spend a lot of money. So the theme for today is don't mess up. Okay? Be very, very careful, because when you allocate resources, right, those cost money. Now, hopefully everyone has signed up for Azure. Has everyone here signed up for Azure? Yeah? 1. Signed up for Azure? 2. Signed up for Azure? Not yet? Okay, so we got 1 remaining. Morning. If you need help signing up with Azure, let me know. I also just did it this morning because I have never used Azure before. I'm more of a GCP guy, but do make sure to sign up for Azure if you have not already. Yesterday, there was mention of concerns about not being able to use a Korean debit card. When I tried it with my Korean debit card, I did not encounter issues. So if you are encountering issues signing up for Azure with your credit card, do let me know. I'll try to help you out as best I can. In terms of needing a credit card, it's just so that if you go over the $200 limit, they'll charge you a real card, but you shouldn't actually need to pay anything for the scope of this boot camp. Everything we do should be under the $200 free money they give you for the trial. Okay, so you should not expect to spend anything. However, towards the end of the intro session here, I'm going to show you the Cost Explorer in Azure, so you can check and make sure you don't spend more than that $200 limit. Okay, so you can check that throughout the day to make sure that you're not accidentally spending money when you should not be. But as usual, in case we have people, well, I guess people online, since everyone here, I think, has been here in previous days, we'll go over the expectations. So again, remember, none of us are super experts. We do this stuff in our daily work, especially Emre. He's the big infrastructure guy, and he'll be handling a good number of the presentations today. But we do use this stuff in our normal work and our daily job. But, you know, always check everything, always test everything, check the documentation of things you're working with, the usual stuff. And again, this is very difficult. We're trying to, especially yesterday, right? Yesterday was a bit of a challenge, even for the organizers. But the goal is exposure and familiarity. We don't expect you to memorize everything or be able to do it immediately in a work setting. The goal is not complete grasp. The goal is showing you what you may not know so that you can do further review and further learning afterwards. We do recommend that you review things at the end of the day on your own time. We also recommend that you make relationships with the people here and try to, you know, work together and kind of support each other. As we say in CodeSeoul, programming is hard, but it's easier with friends. So try to make friends here, try to find people who can support you and whom you can support. And also make sure to ask for help. If you run into issues, you can, you know, kind of flail during a session and one of us will come and assist you. You can also ask on the Discord. Even after the bootcamp, there's not a whole lot of like casual chat going on in the Discord, but if you ask for help with a problem, people jump on and are like, ooh, a problem to solve. I want to help. So don't be afraid to ask for help, especially on our Discord. So what is the plan for today? We're going to go over public cloud providers. Okay, we're going to kind of get you familiar with the basic services that they provide. Most of the focus will be on Azure because Microsoft is providing a space, so the least we can do is use their tools. We're also going to go over a little bit of networking because that's a big thing on cloud. We're also going to go over some of the more common cloud services, you know, your compute services, your storage services, all these kinds of things. We're going to do a brief session on system architecture because that's something that pops up in interviews quite often. And it's quite important to make sure that, you know, your infrastructure actually fulfills the needs of your software. And we'll go over infrastructure as code. where we'll actually deploy some infrastructure. You'll set up servers and such, and then destroy them, all with just a single command once you've written the code. Okay. So it's actually, that one's actually really cool, because the first time you do it, you can be like, I'm going to set up 100 servers. Button. Go. And it just happens. And you're like, I just did a whole bunch of stuff with a single key press. That is absolutely terrifying, because I can, you know, accidentally leave 30 virtual machines on for 1 month and have AWS call you being like, hey, where's our $4,000? That totally didn't happen to me. So make sure to, at the end of today's session, make sure, or even periodically throughout today's sessions, after you've done the initial Azure stuff, check to make sure that you haven't accidentally left some servers on, because they get expensive, okay? But for now, this is the schedule for today. So we're gonna go over what is the cloud, and then we'll do an introduction to networking. We did a little bit of that on day one, but we're going to dive a little deeper into it because you will need to configure networks yourself when you're doing cloud infrastructure. We're also going to do a quick survey of cloud services, go over what services are on the cloud and which ones might be relevant to your needs. Because when you first look at the portfolio of cloud services, there's like 200 services, and you're like, where do I start? So we're going to help you figure out where to start. And then after lunch, we'll do the introduction to system architecture. Then we'll dive into Terraform, and we'll end the day with actually setting up some infrastructure, actually deploying some servers. So it's at the end of that setting up infrastructure session that you want to make sure that there's nothing left and that you don't end up paying for servers overnight that are doing nothing, okay? But we'll kind of go over that in the discussion session at the end of the day, just to make sure everyone's not left everything on. Because the big thing is that this is a free event, right? And we want to make sure that you don't accidentally spend money. So we're going to cover you on that. So any questions about the plan for today? Who's excited to like spin up a bunch of servers with a push of a button? It is really cool the first time you do it. So not quite better, almost there. As usual, we're CodeSeoul. I'm Beej. Actually, I don't think I ever introduced myself throughout this whole thing. Hi guys, I'm Beej. But that's not important. So you know, if you're not on a Discord already, you can scan the QR code, or you can enter the link up there. We are a registered nonprofit. If you have income, go ahead and donate. If you're a student, or if you don't have income right now, don't donate. I will find you. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, real quick, let's pop over. I just want to show you guys in Azure the Cost Explorer, because I want to make sure that ah, crap, did I close it? Give me a second here, guys. Sorry. There it is. All right. So now we haven't gotten there yet, and this is definitely a pre-thing, but I want to make sure this is abundantly clear. When you log into Azure, it looks like this, okay? And the nice part is the cost management thing is right on the main page under tools, okay? So you want to pop in there, and you want to look for, under reporting and analysis, you want to look at cost analysis, okay? And you want to go to all views, and you want to go to, I believe, now this is my guess. You can go to resources, or you can go to cost by resource. Somewhere in here, you can find your costs that you have going, okay? Now, I haven't actually used this yet. This is just if I've done much. So personally, I have never used Azure. I'm going to be learning the Azure part of things with you guys today. But in AWS and in Google, you basically go to this kind of page, and then somewhere within here, you can find what you currently have running and how much it's costing you, okay? So once we start deploying servers, you will want to check this and monitor it closely so you don't leave anything on and accidentally spend money. When you sign up, you get $200 worth, so it's like 270 something thousand won of credit for free, and we're going to use a little bit of that here. There should still be some left over by the end of the bootcamp, but it'll only last for 30 days. So make sure you use that free money when we do all that. Any questions about this thing? Cool. It's pretty simple anyway. So yeah, if you have not signed up for Azure already, please do that. We will use it. And that's pretty much it. So how are we on time? What time is, oh wow, we only took 10 minutes for that. Man, we burned through it. So let's take a second to review what we went over yesterday. Okay, so if we look at yesterday's schedule real quick, give me a second here to pull it up. Nope, that is not the right one. Give me a moment. Sorry, guys. There it is. So yesterday we covered, let me go ahead and make a filter view here. Filter view. Yeah, I know what a filter view is. Go away. And I want to filter by, just want to see Tuesday. No, not Thursday, Tuesday. There we go. So yesterday, we went over Dockerizing stuff. We went over a bunch of database stuff. Went over REST, dependency, all that. So let's do some quick review to see how much you guys remember. Now, the stuff we learned yesterday is not entirely relevant today, but the best way to remember something is to repeat it, especially after you've had a rest from it. So let's see if you can remember the stuff that we covered yesterday. Who can describe to me, or who can describe to me what REST is? Don't all answer at once.
Right.
What's that? Yeah.
Like a special protocol of exchange data with backend server.
Say again?
Yeah, it's a special protocol that is some kind of protocol and standard which we use for exchange data server.
Protocol, no. Standard, yes. And way of exchanging data with the server, yes. Can you describe what the focus of REST, or what the main, crap, now I'm having trouble. So do you remember what REST stands for, or does anyone remember what REST stands for? Yeah, representational state transfer, yes. So what is being represented? Huh? We usually say resources, okay? So if you have here, I can take that. So when we look at it like a REST API, right? Do I still have the yeah, let me see if I still happen to still have my, yeah, here we go. So if we look at some REST API documentation, right? Using this one that we did at the end of yesterday as an example, we have a products resource and we have an orders resource, right? So these are the things that we're representing, okay? And the state, right? We have, this is the state of that resource, basically the data representing the resource. And so we have this representation and we're transferring via HTTP, via requests and responses, we're transferring data about the state of that resource. So in this case, we are creating the resource by transferring from the client to the server a representation in JSON of that resource. Okay? This is just review from yesterday. So we're saying, okay, a product has a name, a description, an image, a price, and some amount of stock. And this is the data for that product. I'm representing it as JSON text, and I am transferring that data to the server for the server to store that new state of the product. Okay? And then when we do a getting a single product, we're requesting from the server, show me the current state of that product represented as JSON. Okay? So this is what REST is, right? Conceptually. In practice, it's you have a path that has basically the resource as part of the path, right? So in this case, the resource is products. And then you have the different HTTP verbs, which perform different operations, okay? So post creates a product, get retrieves information about many or one products. Patch is a partial update. Put is a full update, but we didn't do that here. And then delete deletes a resource. Okay, is that jogging anyone's memory? Okay, I'm seeing very hesitant nods, but I'll take it over nothing. So we covered REST yesterday. Where's the thing? Here it is. So who remembers some of the SQL verbs, SQL statements? Oh, who said? Yeah.
Select, insert, update, delete.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Excellent. So select, insert, update, delete. Absolutely correct. What are two other keywords? Or yeah, let's just go with two of them. What are two other keywords as part of SQL? Going to have someone else answer this time. So select, insert, update, delete are the main verbs. What are two other keywords that they taught you yesterday? Yes, where and join. Absolutely correct. All right. And data modeling. Who can tell me the three types of relationships in databases? Someone who's not the two people who have already answered. Yes, correct. One-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. All right. Very good. You guys are doing a great job. And then, how do I ask a question about that one? Who can describe an example scenario where dependency injection is helpful? Sorry?
For example, we don't need to create the same object every time we call it, and framework usually do it to us. Does to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. For example, connection to that database. In our application, we don't need to create a new instance every time we call some database or something with the data, and it's not an auto injection.
Yes, that is one of the many uses of dependency injection. Very good. All right. Can someone describe another benefit of dependency injection? I want to get a couple of them. That was absolutely correct. It's not necessarily what you think of when you think of dependency injection, but functionally it is a benefit. So another one someone can think of? So what about if, what are different places that you run your application? Docker, yeah, another example. So actually, let me change it a little bit. So Docker, sure, but Docker where? Okay, so which computer? Server or local machine, right? So are these two, the server environment and the local machine environment, these are different environments, right? So your local machine, are you going to use the actual production database? Right, you're not going to use the actual production database. What about on the server?
There's one of the benefits of dependency injection. We can change what we inject and can create resources for each of the environments, and we can just switch when we change the environment.
Excellent. And for the benefit of the stream, I'll just restate what he said. One of the benefits of dependency injection is that we can switch resources being used. depending on the environment where the application is running. So if we're running in one environment, we can give this version of resource. If we're running in another environment, we give a different version of the resource. That's absolutely correct. Cool. All right. And who can tell me one of the differences between a Docker container and a virtual machine? There was a bunch, but just one. Okay. You're good. Yeah.
Virtual machines are on the server level, and Docker is the system level.
What do you mean by server level and what do you mean by system level? Because you could argue that a server is a system.
It's hard to explain, but as I understood, virtual machines are part of the work in the part of the servers, and yeah.
Okay, so I think you're on the right track. I just want to get you to use the right words. So we'll get your support in a second if I can't get her to go down this path. So no, not quite yet. Just a minute. So both of these run on top of some operating system, right? For a virtual machine, you have VMware, right? So a better way to describe it, system level versus server level. What does a VM need? Or sorry, what does Docker need that a VM doesn't need? I'm looking for her to answer. Into the mic?
As a user interface.
User interface? No. You can have a headless VM, you can have a headless Docker container. Not sure? Okay. So remember yesterday, actually, here, pass it on to your, this guy. Yeah. Go for it. Oh. You have to press and hold it for a second. There you go.
The difference between virtual machine and Docker, I think that virtual machine is a full operation system. Docker is a part of the operational system that we need to our program run.
Yeah.
Correctly.
Yes, and I think that's what she was getting at. She just didn't know the words to use. But yes, that's absolutely correct. Docker is based in Linux and uses Linux C groups in order to kind of create an isolated space. And it relies on the host Linux operating system in order to do its work. Whereas a virtual machine is completely standalone. It still needs to run on top of some other operating system, often something like VMware or VirtualBox or something like that. But you can have completely separate operating systems. You can run like a Windows virtual machine on a Mac, or a Linux virtual machine on a Linux server, or Windows in Linux, which, but you can do all of these things. So yes, that's absolutely correct. Good teamwork, you guys. Cool. All right. Yeah, what's up?
So does that mean you would not be able to run a Windows Docker on a Linux machine?
There is no Windows Docker.
There is no Windows Docker, okay.
Yeah. Good question, though. Yeah, Docker is specifically a Linux thing because it uses C groups, which are a Linux thing. Yep. And unfortunately, it's not even like, as I understand, again, I'm not an expert, so there might be things I'm wrong about, but as I understand, even when you're running Docker Desktop on a Mac, it's still running a virtual machine. Because even though both Mac and Linux are based on Unix, I don't think Mac OS has quite all of the utilities that Linux does to properly create the isolated environments that Docker provides. So yeah, it's very specific to Linux.
Does Docker work in Windows?
It creates, is this on? Okay. It actually creates a virtual machine or something. It uses Windows subsystem for Linux, which is kind of a virtual machine. It's really hard to describe, but yeah. Cool. All right. Any questions about yesterday's stuff? Yes. So Rancher Desktop does support Mac and Windows, but it creates a virtual machine. Yeah. Yeah. Docker Desktop does the same thing. It is, or not, I'm sorry. I don't know if it necessarily creates a virtual machine. It probably uses WSL, which is kind of a virtual machine, kind of not. But yeah, in any case, it's running in Linux. Yeah. Also, if you are very curious about Docker and how it works internally, we did do a session a while back. Ooh, I don't know if we recorded it or not. I'll have to check, but we did a session where you basically create your own Docker container. That was really cool. We basically built Docker from scratch. Not the complete system, because there's a lot of cool stuff it does, but the idea of creating your own virtual file system, creating your own process space using Linux C groups, like we did that. And by we, I mean someone presenting who was not me, because I'm not that smart. But it was cool stuff, so definitely check that out. But yeah. All right, any other questions about yesterday before we move on? Yes.
I didn't quite understand the REST talk. What is the purpose and meaning of REST?
So REST is short for representational state transfer. So the idea in REST is you have resources. So a resource, let me get this back on the screen here. A resource could be something like a product or could be something like an order, and that is represented as JSON. You could also represent it as XML or some other kind of thing, but often we use JSON. And then we transfer the state back and forth between the client and the server. So in this case, for create endpoint, for example, we're creating a product resource and we're sending a representation of that product as JSON to the server to put it into a created state from a non-existent state. We can also, from our get resources, or from our get endpoints, we can retrieve a representation of it, again, as JSON from the server to understand the current state of it. Okay, so it's basically just transferring data back and forth about resources represented in some serialization format, in this case JSON, and transferring state back and forth of like editing it, creating it, deleting it, these kinds of things.
So does that mean when the state is on the server, the client does not have the state, and when the state is on the client, the server does not have the state?
Not necessarily. So the server has, usually REST API servers themselves are stateless. The state of resources is stored in the database. And so the API server retrieves it from the database and sends it to the client, or vice versa. Really, the API is just a middleman. The API just executes business logic on the data either sent to the client or received from the client, and either written to the database or read from the database. Does that answer your question?
Mostly, thanks.
Cool.
Is this for end user or you won't?
No, this is for developers. End users don't do this. This is what your front-end engineers will look at to be like, okay, what data do I have and how do I use it? This is basically documentation for you. So as a back-end engineer, you build your back-end API, and this type of documentation can be automatically generated based on the code you write. And then you can basically just, if your front-end engineers are experienced and they know the kind of business domain, you can just send them this and you can just go. They're good to go. They might have questions and all that, but this covers all the details of what data needs to go back and forth. All good? Great. So we did do a supplemental session last night. If you guys had to run out once we finished stuff, so we did stream it, so you can check that online if you need. But we're out of time, and we need to start the next session in a couple minutes. So again, this is the schedule for today. Do make sure to, once we get to, nope, sorry, that's the schedule for yesterday. This is the schedule for today. When we get to this setting up infrastructure, do make sure to check Azure and make sure your cost things are not happening. Make sure all your costs are removed. And if you need help setting up Azure, catch us or if you need help signing up for Azure, catch us sometime today before this 3:30 session, and we'll help you get set up. Cool. Thank you, everyone. All right.